one of the things I'm always on the lookout as I read the scriptures is what does the Bible say about the latter years of a person's life, about old age. Some things bring this home to you. I had to about to renew my car insurance. So you come up with Google Plus and you type in all your parameters, and something's going on when the cheapest quote comes from Saga. Now that joke hits in certain places, some people are thinking, no idea what that means. But I think it's important to, well, what does the Bible say on it? I've looked at Psalm 92 before, which talks about bearing fruit in old age and remaining fresh and green. And so I like to sort of think, well, what does the Word of God say? And I came across Psalm 71, and that's what I want to have a look at this morning. There are two key verses in Psalm 71, and they give you basically the key to this psalm. And one is verse 9, and the psalmist writes this. He says, "Do not cast me away when I am old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone." And also verse 18. "Even when I am old and grey, do not forsake me, O God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your might to all who are to come." The translations vary a bit on this particular verse. The NIV and others translate it in a way that makes you think the person is approaching old age. But if you look at the King James Version, the King James Version has it slightly different. "Now also, when I am old and grey," i.e. talking from the perspective of actually being at that point in life. And so this psalm hinges on the age of the psalmist. He is in the latter years of his life, either approaching or at. And so this psalm is him, in a sense, at this stage, penning this psalm and his thoughts and his perspective. And because it's in the Bible, it's obviously showing us something. And so I want to have a look at Psalm 71 this morning. It's not a familiar, common psalm. In fact, many of you probably don't even, I hadn't come across it. I was looking for a psalm to read, and I sort of skipped through many of them, and you think, this is depressing, this is depressing, this is depressing. And eventually you hit one and you think, I might actually get something out of this one and feel uplifted at the same time. So we're going to go through Psalm 71. Basically, it's going to be about a Bible study on Psalm 71. But it's a lovely psalm. And the way to approach this is to realize the age of the psalmist. He is in the latter years of his life. And so we have the first 4 verses. "In you, O Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Rescue me and deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me and save me. Be my rock of refuge to which I can always go. Give the command to save me, for you are my rock and my fortress. Deliver me, O my God, from the hand of the wicked, from the grasp of cruel and evil men." One of the other key aspects of this psalm is that the psalmist is facing oppression from other people. And in the opening verses, he's saying here, "Deliver me, my God, from the hand of the wicked, from the grasp of evil men." So when he penned this, he's looking to God as his refuge. He's asking God to rescue him and deliver him and save him. And in the middle of this, he gives an interesting statement. He realizes the power of his God. He realizes the predicament of his situation, and he says, "Give the command to save me." Here he is looking to God and speaking to God and saying, God, you see what's going on. I'm calling on you in your righteousness. Rescue me and deliver me in your righteousness. He's calling on a righteous and just God who he knows will see his situation in a right and just way. And he says, God, give the command to save me. That's a fascinating statement, and I'm sure there's a wealth within it. He's calling on God, you give the command, and you will engage your forces on my behalf. You will speak, and things will happen. And so when he pens this is his situation. There's something to realize about 71 is it's a complete psalm, but I don't believe it was written all in one go. Because as we go through it, you will see he's writing in the present tense all the time. But they are about different episodes in his experience. But this bit is about him saying, you see my situation and my predicament, God. I pray that you will save me in it. You see what's going on, but I'm calling to you. And in the next section, here, as I say, the psalmist is in his latter years, but he reflects on his life. And that's a very powerful thing to do, reflect on what God has been and done for you throughout your life so far. Remember, focus on what he has done, what you've gone through. Because people in the latter stages of life have a lot more to look back on and a lot more experience of God to relate to identify with, to remember. And the psalmist here says this, for you have been my hope, O sovereign Lord, my confidence since my youth. And he goes back even further. From birth I have relied on you. You brought me forth from my mother's womb. I will ever praise you. I have become like a portent to many, a sign to many. But you are my strong refuge. My mouth is filled with your praise, declaring your splendor all day long. That statement there, from birth I have relied on you. I wasn't quite sure how a baby could rely on God. And the translation of that can be that you either rely or you're supported by. And I think the supported by is probably more accurate in this particular verse. But it's interesting, the psalmist recognized that right from his birth, God was involved in his life. I can identify with that. I can understand that. And that's not unique to the psalmist. It's said of other people. From the womb, they were ordained by God. Said of Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. David could say it, and others could say it. Right from the very early age. It was said of Moses that the parents could look at Moses when he was a baby and see there was something about him which was special. Not quite sure how they saw it. But they recognized the hand of God was on that child. And the psalmist here says, from birth I have relied on you. From birth you have supported me. You have been my confidence since my youth. And so the psalmist is looking back and he's saying, Lord, you were there at my birth. You were there onwards. You were there in my youth. You were my confidence. I put my trust in you. You were special to me. And he could probably say on and on, you were there, Lord. You were with me. He's reflecting back on situations and circumstances. And he's saying, God, you were there right from the very beginning. I may be at the latter years of my life, but right from the very beginning. And when we consider the sort of the state of a baby, total dependence on someone else, the psalmist is almost saying, well, look, I was completely dependent on you then. And the thing about as you get older is, in the natural sense, you would say perhaps strength wanes, but there becomes a greater dependence on God to sustain. And it's interesting at the early stage and the latter stage, there is that great dependence on God. But this is what the psalmist is trying to focus on. God is my refuge. God is my confidence. God is the one who can issue the command to save me. God has been with me in every single stage of my life up to now. And you almost get that sense that he's saying, well, you've been with me up till now. Why shouldn't you be with me into the future? You've been with me in very special ways up to now. Why would you desert me? And obviously the answer to that question is no. You will be with me. But notice something right at the very end. My mouth is filled with your praise. He is a man of praise. In his latter years, he is praising God. He is a man of praise. And I believe there is strength in praise. And more than that, he said, I declare your splendor all day long. He was a man who recounted what God had done for him. A man who recounted how God had been with him. And he was prepared to talk about that to others. He would speak of God's splendor. We go into the next section. Do not cast me away when I'm old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone. And here he goes back to the problem he has. For my enemies speak against me. Those who wait to kill me conspire together. They say, God has forsaken him. Pursue him and seize him, for no one will rescue him. He is in a situation where people are saying to him, well, your God has forsaken you. He was going through that period in life, which we all go through, where God seems, well, where is he? He doesn't seem to be obvious at this point in time. And the people were saying of him, God's given up on you. God's not looking after you anymore. You're now vulnerable. And we're going to take advantage of that vulnerability. We're going to get at you. And the psalmist is here saying to God, look, they're saying that about me, but God, don't forsake me. Be not far from me, O God. Come quickly. Come quickly, O my God, to help me. May my accusers perish in shame. May those who want to harm me be covered with scorn and disgrace. But this is coupled with him saying, I'm in the latter years. And he talks here about his strength is gone. I'm not convinced this is talking about his strength waning in age, because the word there is gone. It's not waning. I think what's happened to the psalmist is in a situation and all his human strength, he's just exhausted. If it's talking about King David, some people think this is King David's psalm and talking about the problems he faced after his adultery with Bathsheba and the rebellion of his kids and the sheer hassle they caused him. And they attempted to usurp the kingdom from him. And this could well be David saying, you know, look what's happening. I'm exhausted with this. I don't know what to do. My strength's gone. And so he's just bringing his case before God and saying, look, you can see the situation. I'm worn out. I don't have it in me to deal with this situation, but I'm looking to you, looking to your power, to your strength, to all that you are. Next section. Single verse on its own, but the psalmist says, but as for me, I will always have hope. I will always have hope. Because he knew God had been with him up until now for many years, and he knew God always delivered. God always came through on his promises. God always looked after him. And he said, I will always have hope, because I know what you have been to me in the past, and I'm looking for that to the future. But notice this very last thing he says, I will praise you more and more. is one of the things that people should do, us as Christians in latter years of our life, is praise God more and more. I wonder if that is a key. There are things that I cannot do. Psalmist Pratt says, I'm in crisis, in a difficult situation. I may not be able to deal with my enemies like I used to in my youth, but there's one thing I can do. I can praise you more and more. Perhaps the thing to do is forget what we can't do and focus on what we can do. And praise is possible at any stage of life. And here the psalmist says, I will do it more and more. I'm not content with just doing it a bit. I will praise God more and more. He will be the focus. Next section. And here he goes on to talk about how he will speak of his God, how he will tell of his God. My mouth will tell of your righteousness, of your salvation all day long, though I know not its measure. I can't measure the extent of the salvation you have shown me. I can't measure the extent of the righteousness you have shown me, but I will tell of it. I will speak of it. Is that a key to a life? To just declare God's salvation, God's righteousness. Not us, but talk about what God has done, about the way he's operated in our lives. To talk about God's righteousness, we know from the New Covenant, this is written under the Old Covenant, but from the New Covenant we recognize how wonderful the righteousness of God is. If the psalmist could declare the righteousness and the salvation of God then under an old covenant, how much more should we be declaring the salvation and the righteousness of God under the greater covenant? People want to hear, I think, the righteousness of God, how much he loves them, how much he cares about them, how much he wants to engage with them, how much he has demonstrated through his Son. And here the psalmist says, I will tell of your righteousness and of your salvation, even though I don't know the extent of it. I'm only scratching the surface, the psalmist says. How much more perhaps us are only scratching the surface of God's righteousness and salvation to us. I will come and proclaim your mighty acts, O sovereign Lord. He didn't just talk about the righteousness of God in a sense of theory, but he could talk about the righteousness of God and salvation in practice. How God had worked in his life, the things God had done, of which there had probably been many, and he's recounting them. I will proclaim your righteousness, yours alone. It's a great place to get to. Don't proclaim our righteousness, because we don't have any, but proclaim his righteousness, of which it is without measure. And then he goes back, he says, since my youth, O Lord, you have taught me, and to this day I declare your marvelous deeds. And he reflects on what the Lord has taught him, what the Lord has been to him, what the Lord has shown him since his youth. And then he says, even when I am old and grey, do not forsake me, Lord. But I think there's a key coming here as to what he is expecting from God. He wants God to not forsake him. He wants God to be with him all the time. And we have the wonderful statement in Hebrews. God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we have that confidence. But why does he want God to be with him in his latter years? I want to declare your power to the next generation. Your might to all who are to come. I want to get the message out, but not just to my generation, my peers, those I can perhaps relate to easiest, but he had a heart for getting the message out to the next generation. If we have that heart, we probably have a confidence before God to say, God, I want your strength. I want you to be with me because I want to get the message out. And I want to get it out to the next generation, the generation that's coming up. And he says, I want to declare your power and I want to declare your might. And I thought as I read that, how much of the power of God have we experienced? How much of the might of God have we experienced? That we have those things which we can talk about to successive generations and say, look what God has done. Look how he's demonstrated his power. Look at what's occurred. So often, and this is a challenge I think to all of us, the Bible can be theory. It's a great book. But so often it has to be into practice. It has to be into power. It has to be in might. But the psalmist had experienced it throughout his life. And he said, that's what I want to tell to people. And I want to keep on telling it to people. And I think his heart was, until the day I die, I want to be declaring you. And I want to be declaring your power. And I want to be showing your power. And God, whatever you do, that's what I want to do. And I want you to honour that desire of my heart. That is a powerful desire in the latter years of life to focus on. God, that is what I want to do. And you probably recognise, well, to do it, I'm going to need your strength. I'm going to need your power. We have the wonderful words in Isaiah 40, 29 to 31. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. The promise is there. And the reason he wanted it was not for selfish reasons, but so that he could continue to declare his God to successive generations. The next section. Your righteousness reaches to the skies, O God, you who have done great things. Who, O God, is like you? Though you have made me see troubles many and bitter, you will restore my life again. From the depths of the earth you will again bring me up. You will increase my honor and comfort me once again. There seems to be a confidence coming through from the psalmist. You will increase my honor. How many perhaps in latter years think that honor decreases rather than increases? And yet his trust in God is such that he believed that God would increase his honor. You see, he is expectant of his God to work in his latter years in amazing ways. And then into the last section. And this section really, it's like happens in a lot of the Psalms. And this is why I say this psalm is written in blocks. We've seen the block where he's talking about, well, I'm in a mess. I'm in a difficult situation. I'm in a challenging place. God, give the command to save me. You're my rock. You're my refuge. And this bit of the psalm is penned when the psalmist has seen God deliver him. So everything that he's expecting in the psalm now comes to fruition. And here he is looking back on what's happened. And he says this, I will praise you with the harp for your faithfulness, O my God. I will sing praise to you with the lyre, O Holy One of Israel. My lips will shout for joy when I sing praise to you, I whom you have redeemed. My tongue will tell of your righteous acts all day long. And he can add to what God has done for him, those righteous acts that he remembers. He now has a new one to add to the list, because he finishes this psalm with this statement: for those who wanted to harm me have been put to shame and confusion. God, you've come through. The God who was with me from birth, with me through youth, taught me from youth. Now as I approach latter years, or am in the latter years, you're still there, and you're coming through for me, and I will praise you. You see, that was his expectation of his God. May that be our expectation in latter years, that God will still continue coming through, day after day after day. But may we have a heart that continues to declare to successive generations the righteousness of God, the salvation of God. May we have a heart that wants to see the power of God and the mighty deeds of God, that we can add to our conversation with others. A psalm for the latter years of a person's life, but an inspiring psalm, and one for us to take on board. Amen.